Welcome everyone to our SOMOS Masterclass. It's great to see you here. Some familiar faces and some faces I haven't seen just yet. Uh, but so my name is Kasia, and I will be facilitating this evening together with Anton, and I'm a co-creator of SOMOS. Perhaps just this, so for us to really arrive here together, the invitation is to really just maybe just notice what you may need to really arrive in the space. So it can be a little stretch. We've all been going on about our days. It's quite late. So just seeing if, yeah, I can see stretches, I can see yawns. Yes, so just noticing what you may need so that you can be present with yourself and with us here in this next couple of hours together on screen. Yeah, and maybe just giving yourself a little squeeze. Like, oh yeah, I've got so far in a day. That's, here I am. It's evening. And I'm here engaging with the world in this way. And just taking a moment to take a deep breath together and making a sound or a sigh of an in and out breath. And taking another deep breath together. And out breath with a sound or a sigh. And the last deep breath together. Ah. And just noticing, how are you feeling in your body right now? Just taking a moment to notice. And if you do want to share anything in the chat, that would just make it more interactive with all of us. And there is wisdom in a group. So there is always things that we can learn from each other. Right, so we're going to give a little bit of intro about the session and about SOMOS. And so my name is Kasia, and I've been facilitating for I don't know, maybe around 10 years now. And I'm a trained psychotherapist, and I've been invited to co-create SOMOS with Anton, which I'm very happy about. And Anton is going to tell you a bit more about what actually SOMOS is.
Yeah. Thanks, Kasia. So a bit about me is I'm the owner of Sargars, and we also run a space in London called House of Transformation. My background is as a designer and consultant in sustainability, property, and tech. And yeah, we got this incredible opportunity just over 2 years ago to take over a countryside estate in Devon called Selgars. And we run it as a co-living as well as a nature retreat venue. And at the end of last year, we completed the purchase, so it's our forever home now. And I guess the journey of Somos began with walking the dog along the river and thinking about what could we really bring to Salgar, to this really beautiful, enchanting land that was unique. And what I wanted to do was come up with a particular flavor of personal development and leadership journey. And I knew that at the heart of it, it was going to be about exploring the relationship with the body and with nature. Because I think this is often something that is missed or neglected or not given enough attention in most leadership and personal development journeys and programs. We kind of get stuck in our head and our stories and don't actually come back into what is true and alive in the moment. And so when the name came to me, because I was thinking about the power of this kind of deeper intelligence, intuition, somatic intelligence that we each hold within ourselves, but often we shut off or we even are completely disconnected from that. And then later I learned that somos also means we are in Spanish, so it was a great fit. And then I reached out to Kasia, and then we've held a program at Salgars for 3 times now since we moved. And we've always done it at the end of the event season, at the beginning of the event season. So it's always been at the end of autumn or the beginning of spring. And so it's been quite chilly. And so we could only do so many sessions outside. So we decided this year we were going to make Somos a summer experience and instead complement it with an online session that we can do now and we can share more broadly online. So that's why we're here today. It's a bit of an experiment to try and see how we can convey what is really quite a sensory and experiential idea in an online format. Cool. So at the heart of Somos is this journey of self-discovery and transformation that we are all on. And it never stops. You know, regardless of what stage we are in life, we're always faced with elements of uncertainty and change that we must always navigate. And so that question of rediscovering who we are, it's not that we just do it once and that's it. We figured it out. It's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing cycle of reinvention and rediscovery and growth. And one of the things we believe is that this process is really catalyzed and accelerated and enabled if we're able to tap into our somatic intelligence, this kind of deeper embodied wisdom that we all have within us that makes us human. And so, yeah, these are some photos from Selgars and the programs we've run. And this is our giraffe, our barn giraffe, Cami. And so we do lots of lovely meals, lots of movement, lots of time in nature, lots of time in circle, um, all good stuff that helps bring things to the surface. And so at the core of what Somos is about is exploring this relationship between mind, body, and nature. And that's a personal relationship to each of us. But when we explore it, often it helps us to connect with that deeper truth within us and realign with the purpose that really can guide our life in the right direction. And I think that's one of the big bits of feedback that we've got from all the three somoses that we've run at Selgars is this really helps to connect with self and connect with truth and realign with purpose. And then within that, we also touch upon how we deal with change and uncertainty, both in our lives, but also in our organizations and businesses, and also how we deal with stress and anxiety. You know, we're often in environments that are incredibly dysregulating and stressful and high pressure, and we're faced with a lot of stress and anxiety that often we cannot change. And so, how do we adapt to those environments? How do we regulate our nervous system? And how do we learn to thrive within a constant state of change and uncertainty that we live in? And I think exploring the mind body nature relationship and thinking about how we design our lifestyle, but also how we regulate our nervous system on a daily basis is kind of one of the most important ways of building capacity as leaders and being able to thrive in our lives. And so that's kind of what Somos is in a nutshell and in a diagram. And so we've tried to break up this session into four pillars, which are the four areas of content that we touch upon in Somos. The first is how do we regulate our nervous system, and what are those kind of techniques that help us to come back to a place of regeneration and resilience within ourselves. How do we widen our window of tolerance? How do we notice when we're in fight, flight, or freeze or fawn response? And understanding the nervous system really helps us to understand the value of all of these practices and all of these processes that where we go out into nature, where we slow down, where we reconnect with our body. This is all about regulating our nervous system so that we can be more connected with our true self. The next pillar is around embodied awareness, which is the ability to actually use movement to better connect with our deeper intuition. It's something that has been a massive transformational impact in my life. Me and Cash actually met on a dance floor at a movement medicine session, and the power that movement and dance can have to helping us to let go of our stories and our busy mind and actually really connect with what is real and true. And so often we get caught up in what we think we should be doing and what we others expect of us, and we actually lose our inner voice. And movement is one of the best ways to kind of reconnect with that in a really powerful, direct way. The next pillar is empathic communication. I think we cannot exist in the world in an island by ourselves. We are constantly in relationship, both with our colleagues at work, but also at home, in our families, and in our relationships. And building on nonviolent communication, and also recognizing how our relationships also dysregulate us or co-regulate us and impact our ability to uh, perform, but also find meaning and joy in the lives that we lead. And that's a really important part also of SOMOS, is how do we exist in relationship? How do we collaborate and communicate with others? Not just looking just at ourselves and our own wellness and well-being, but also how we relate. And finally, we have somatic problem solving. And this is one of the things that I found is really incredible, which is how we can reconnect with our body and go out into nature, not just as a way to rest and recharge and kind of restore our energies, but also as a way to do creative work, to solve complex problems, to also ask ourselves deeper questions of what decisions we should be making and what direction we should be pushing ourselves towards. And sometimes we are in moments of transition or crossroads where we need to make big decisions that are not easy. And so coming back to the body, coming back to nature, and seeing nature as a tool to help us find new knowledge and to solve complex problems is, I think, a really incredible field of possibility. And so a lot of the program is kind of geared towards actually experiencing that and then integrating and discussing each of our individual experiences. So those are the pillars. And now I'm going to dive into the first pillar of nervous system. So I think it all begins with understanding how our brain has evolved. You know, we were first reptiles, then we were mammals, and then we became Homo sapiens. And our brains are actually a product of all of those um, three states. And so in nature, and this has been studied and written about a lot, in particular by Peter Levine, who wrote the book Waking the Tiger, which is a really kind of foundational book around basically nervous system regulation theory. And what was observed in nature is whenever there is a danger, let's say a predator is looking to chase and attack a prey, there is a fight-flight response. You know, adrenaline is rushed into our bodies so that we can better escape or fight against a threat. Then we also have this reptilian response, which is to freeze or to play dead. That is the last line of defense. It's wired into our survival instincts from when we were animals in the animal kingdom. And what would happen is after the process of danger, fight, flight, freeze happens, there's then this discharge. So you'd see antelopes or gazelles that have escaped a predator actually minutes later get up and then violently shake and have this energetic discharge and release. And this is important for coming back to a state of presence and normality. But we don't do that. And we often hold on to that trauma, that stress, and that can lead to chronic pain and burnout and a lot of damage to our health long term. And what Peter Levine writes about is that, okay, we're not being chased by lions and tigers anymore, but a perceived threat has the same physiological response as a real threat in kind of a physical sense. Even though we're not being attacked physically, the threat of losing your job, the threat of being rejected by people that you love, not feeling a sense of belonging as a social animal, feeling alone or lonely or isolated, has the same traumatic effects to our nervous system as being chased by a lion or a tiger in the wild. And so this, I think, is a really important foundational knowledge when we think about our well-being, but also when we think about how we regulate our nervous system and deal with the inevitable stresses and unpredictable triggers that we get in our day-to-day lives. So polyvagal theory was kind of born out of the work that Peter Levine did. And it basically, in a nutshell, it says that we have this kind of green state. I call it the regenerative zone, but it's also been known as the friendly and free state. It's basically when we're at our best, when we're connected, when we're conscious, when we're best able to relate and solve problems creatively. This is where we feel safe. We often get triggered, and if that trigger is sustained for a long enough period of time, we actually transition to this fight-flight response, this hyperarousal, and it comes about when our sympathetic nervous system is activated. On the other side, we have the opposite response almost, which is freeze-faint or hyperarousal, where our parasympathetic nervous system is activated. And within each situation, so for fight flight, we start to feel agitated, afraid, angry, defensive. When we're in freeze faint, we're going to feel tired, numb, lonely, avoidant. It's really important not to stay in these states for too long, because what that does is it actually exhausts our body and actually makes us less able to then go about our day to day. And so that's where somatics come into play, using breath and down-regulating breath to bring us back into a state of calm and safety, moving our bodies, using these kind of even just stretching and getting up or changing your physical space all the way through to a bit of shaking and a bit of movement and voice activation. All of these soothing and activating exercises actually are really essential to helping us come back to a regenerative place within our own bodies so that we can better make decisions, so that we can respond rather than react to situations. And ultimately, resilience, as polyvagal theory kind of maps out, is how it is all about expanding our window of tolerance. So how many things can we encounter throughout the day and still stay regulated? How able are we to notice when we have gone into dysregulation and then come back? Sometimes in the moment, sometimes within the space of half an hour or even a day or a week. And so this is kind of the essence of what nervous system regulation is about. There's another element which I think is important and which is very unique to human beings and the kind of complex relational and organizational dynamics that we exist in, and economic dynamics as well, which is the fawn-flatter response, which is a combination of hypo and hyperarousal. And this is basically when we pretend everything is okay and we people please and we're in denial about the reality and we try and convince ourselves that everything is okay. This is how we fall into cycles of dysregulation and actually end up completely dissociating from our nervous system, not being able to read the signals of the body, and then eventually getting sick and burning out. And this can become a chronic thing if we go through the cycle again and again and again and don't change our lifestyle and our behavior. This is what leads to then substance abuse, overeating, poor sleep, all these things that we often face in life. Because actually we don't just go into fight flight and then back into the regenerative zone. We cycle between them. You know, let's say something happens that provokes us at work. We get really agitated, fight flight, really worked up, we exhaust ourselves, then we numb out because we have no energy left. Then we convince ourselves that everything is okay. But we still stay in that state of anxiety, not feeling safe. And we're not doing enough to resource ourselves to come back into that regenerative zone. And then we can't focus as much. We procrastinate. It's harder to get into a state of flow. We don't collaborate, relate. We want to isolate ourselves, and we struggle. And this becomes a kind of downward spiral. And so often it takes a small trigger unnoticed that leads to more and more kind of poor choices. And then we come out of connection with our bodies. And this is kind of a way that this is something that I've observed in myself on many occasions, but is a cycle that we repeat again and again. And so a big part of what SOMOS is about is stepping back and noticing how much our nervous system and how much our actual environment and lifestyle and workplace, actually that whole system that we live in, is dysregulating and is actually affecting our long-term health and wellness, and how we kind of need to almost build resilience and fight against that. And what are all the things that we need to keep reminding ourselves to do, both in the moment, every day, kind of through breath, mindfulness, soothing, activating exercises to stay in that regenerative zone, but also, are we neglecting our relationships? Do we have a strong enough community? Also food and nutrition, sleep and rest, creativity, play, nature, travel, dance, sports, movement, fitness, this, our whole life system. Thinking about that, reflecting on that, finding our own words, and actually taking it seriously. And when we step out of our day-to-day busy schedules, it can be really powerful to reflect actually what needs more attention, and how do we build resilience in our lives. So yeah, so that in a nutshell is kind of the foundational element and the first pillar. But of course, it's easy to say, but it's about really going in deeper with yourself, and really also looking back at the choices you've been making throughout your, at least the last few months of your life. So, because it's easy to, we all know this, but yet we don't put it into practice. And giving yourself time to figure out why that is the case and what changes can you make in your day to day is a really important practice. So, yeah. So now I'm going to hand over to Kasha for the next pillars.
Thanks, Anton. And in the spirit of actually bringing it into daily life, I wanted to invite us all to actually just take a deep breath together. And again, without breath, with a sigh, just so that we can come back to ourselves after hearing. Just taking these moments sometimes in a day, in a meeting, whenever we are engaged in work. I quite often actually when I get stuck in a work zone, I need to remember to just take a deep breath, and the sigh really helps to us also to regulate in the vagus nerve, which helps us soothe the nervous system and come and bring us back to the regenerative zone. Yes, so we're going to go into an example and a bit more experiential, sort of reflective part of our time together. So the invitation is to think of a real example of a high stress situation or a difficult interaction that you may have had recently. It doesn't have to be, on a something that really has been ultra stressful and is still really within you, but something that you've noticed that was difficult, was challenging for you. And just take a few minutes just to take your notebook and write down what happened, who was involved, where you, how did you respond, how did this situation impact you? Just really going into the observation mode, just really sort of as if you were observing the situation from outside first, to bring the context in, and then coming to yourself and really noticing how did I respond? How did it impact me? So let's just take a couple of minutes to reflect on that. And perhaps you may identify whether you've gone into a fight response, or a flight response, freeze or fawn. Okay. So hopefully you have as much sort of detail and information about that situation as we can in this space of time. We will be working with this situation a bit more, so we can move to the next question. The next question is moving us to the level of body and sensations. So just perhaps writing down, what did you notice in your body? And both right now, when you're recalling this situation, perhaps you've noticed some tension, perhaps you've noticed coldness, perhaps you've noticed a difference in your breath, or perhaps there was some tightness, or perhaps there was ease in your body. So whatever you may have noticed, just take a note of that. And perhaps you have a memory. How did your body experience that situation in the moment too? So it could be both, either when we were now recalling the situation or when it was happening. Perhaps you noticed that your heart rate changed. You notice your breath becoming deeper or more shallow. And if you're willing, you may want to share some of these sensations in a chat. Don't worry about going into the story, going about the situation. This is for you. Just if you want to share some bits that you may have noticed, some experiences, some sensations. Like chest, noticeable heartbeat, cramped stomach, tightening of chest again, just closing the chest area. Yeah, tense body, dry mouth, lots of tension. Yeah, beautiful. Really noticing all these subtle moments, subtle sensations, foggy head, feeling of collapsing in and shallower breath. All these sensations are the messages and the ways in which our body is communicating with us. So it really gives us a clue of what physiological state we are in. So when we start to learn, how can we listen to this in a moment? Because I'm wondering if you were able to identify these in the moment of that situation, but often it's not sort of it's not natural to us to sort of be able to be in the conversation and still be able to notice these sensations. So that's something that we're practicing more at SOMOS. Really, this developing a muscle and developing a practice of body listening. How we can be aware of the state we're in. How we can stay aware with what's going on in our bodies. The belly contracting, the shoulders closing, all the blood rushing through the head and heartbeats faster. What actually happens and when we become aware of it in a moment. What happens is that then we can stop being on autopilot and sort of perpetuating the same response and reaction. So we stop being reactive and we actually can start having a choice. So with awareness comes a choice, and what we can choose is to come back to our body and shift the state or give it attention so that we can really release this tension through our body. So perhaps we may need to leave the conversation for a moment, if that's possible, and allow ourselves to take some deep breaths or to shake, which is really quite helpful. One of my favorite practices is shaking. Shaking things off when my chest tightens and I can't breathe, and really just shaking it off or taking that deep breath with a sound and sigh. I can really see how differently then my body can be in a moment, and how differently I can respond to the situation, how differently I can be in a communication and interaction with others, and also the quality of my thoughts become very, very different. So that's something we are practicing through during SOMOS, doing a lot of embodied practices together. And one other practice that I quite like practicing, and that could be something we could do together here, is a butterfly tap. So if you want to cross your arms on your shoulders and just gently tap your shoulders with your palms of your hands, just alternating the tapping. And just taking a moment and just also noticing whether you notice any shift in your body or not. The beauty of this practice is that we can have a whole menu of various exercises and practices, and some may work for some people, and others will work better for other people. But again, we are bringing a variety of various practices in SOMOS so that we can have that choice. Okay, just taking a moment just to squeeze your shoulders again, letting your body know that you're here, bringing that, just bringing your awareness back to your body. So again, the way we do that with SOMOS is also that as we did the check-in at the beginning of the session, the embodied check-in, just a bit of a stretch, etc. That's also something we invite when we are working with groups. These frequent check-ins, breaks for deep breath, or a brief movement or a shake. And there's something happens when we are together as a group. There is a shared collective wisdom. So we always invite whoever may feel like they need to move or they need to breathe or there is a shift in the energy of the room needed. They are invited to share it with the group, as we very often do not speak only for ourselves, but we speak for the collective, we speak for the group. So that's also something that may be useful to use within meetings or group settings, team settings, just that awareness of bringing frequent check-ins, bringing these moments for breath, bringing these moments for stretch, so that we can regulate the energy in a group and be aware of it, because it can really affect how productive we can be and also how present we can be with each other in the room. Okay, so I will invite another deep breath. Yeah, and a stretch and a yawn that I'm seeing as well. Yes, whatever we need. Really just bringing it back. We spend so much time sitting and not really allowing our bodies to actually not being in touch with our bodies. We spend so much time in our heads and being, in front of laptops, computers, sitting down all days. So just even these tiny moments of checking in may be really, really powerful in how we in the levels of energy and levels of presence that we can offer to ourselves. So this brings me to the theme of co-regulation and how our nervous systems are impacting each other. So our autonomic nervous system is both shaped and regulated through interactions with others. So our nervous system is always looking for cues for safety or danger. So whenever we are in a relationship, very unconsciously, we are checking out, is it safe or is it not safe for me? And if it's not safe for me, we will go to those whether flight or fawn places and responses. So if we approach our interactions with others with that in mind, we can really start recognizing that the state of our nervous system will affect the people around us and vice versa. So if we are feeling regulated, it will affect the person we are in communication interacting with. And if they are, we co-regulate in this way. So we can, again, then choose to take a moment to regulate our nervous system before we are entering a meeting, before we are entering a conversation or a challenging conversation with someone else. And this can help the other person to co-regulate. And what it opens up is we stop being stuck in the same responsive habitual patterns of survival, but actually we can start opening up to new possibilities and new ways of approaching that difficulty, that conflict within a relationship or that particular situation. So here we come to the idea of empathic communication, which we can help us also to regulate our nervous system through self-empathy and the awareness of our feelings and needs. The notion of empathic communication was inspired by nonviolent communication approach developed by Marshall Rosenberg, and I imagine some of you may have heard of or are very aware of NVC, or maybe some of you haven't heard of it. But the part that we want to focus on is the part of identifying our feelings and needs, and the communication based on feelings and needs, and a little bit of a taste of what that way of communicating may involve, and how this can bring the self-empathy to us, which then can really help us to self-regulate. So we rarely use a whole range of vocabulary of our feelings and needs. And we may be missing out at times, actually, because it sometimes it's a very subtle word, like a difference in the word that can make a real difference. And Marshall Rosenberg developed a list of feelings that can help us with expanding our vocabulary. And there is a lot, and don't worry about all of them right now. So, because we won't be able to go through all of them, but I do encourage you to, if you haven't seen this before, if you haven't heard of NVC before, just to spend some time in your own time after the session, just going through these feelings and noticing what happens to you when you read them. Like, can you recognize it as a feeling that you may be experiencing on a regularly, or something that resonates with you more or less? But what's worth noticing for the purposes of today is that this list is divided into feelings when our needs are met and feelings when our needs aren't met. And I really believe that this is a way more helpful distinction than, when we habitually say, oh, this is a positive feeling or this is a negative feeling. And we are trying to sort of push away all these negative feelings and just stay only experiencing all the positive feelings, which I think sometimes is really unhelpful, because what we do is just deny part of our experience. And in the way that Marshall Rosenberg is bringing it here is that we can see feelings as messengers that can help point us towards our unmet needs. And why is that important? So again, Marshall Rosenberg says that our actions everything we do in life, all our actions are attempts to meet a need. And if we don't know what these needs are, we often stay on the level of actions, or how he calls it, strategies, to meet the need. And this is where the conflict often happens, on the level of our strategies. And when we recognize the deeper need that may be underlying our action, we have way more possibility to connect and have empathy for others. Because needs are universal. We all have had an experience of those needs at some point in our lives. So that means that we can relate to other people experiencing these needs. We do have different ways of meeting these needs, though, which is, again, where the conflict often happens. And that often, what I was thinking about, how often in different leadership and different organizations, some of us may have a need for efficiency and really looking out for the outcome and result. And some of us may have more prominent need for connection, collaboration, and harmony, which, again, what we really want to focus on is the process, it's the relationship. And we can get into that difficulty because we have some people focus on outcomes, some people on a process, and then it's really hard to find a middle way. But I think when we can connect it to the level of needs, I imagine that, everyone in a team at some point would have felt the need for efficiency, another would have felt the need for connection and harmony. Maybe not in that particular scenario, but they would be able to connect to that, which then again can create more compassion and empathy, and create, like, open up a space to together look for ways that may in some way meet all those needs, or can really create a different a third option that can emerge from that. The invitation is to, I think Anton will share a link in a chat to those list of needs and feelings, so you can see them for yourself. And again, if you can go back to your example, yeah, so what did you feel in that moment? Really connecting. Next question. Just again, coming back to your situation. And just if you remember, what did you do in that moment? Did you were you able to respond? Where you feel like you can't say anything? Did you freeze? Perhaps you've said something, then sort of regretted saying this. Moving further to our last question. And coming back to our lists of needs. Just identifying what was that need that wasn't met in that moment. The list of needs isn't exhaustive. It can be expanded, but it's quite helpful to sort of have a look at that and really see what resonates. What is it that, what is that need that you really were looking for to have met? Yeah, and it's interesting to identify these needs and sort of go back to the strategy and to see how we were trying to have that need met. What was our strategy in that moment? And perhaps just reflect um, whether there may be other ways, other strategies you could have met these needs in that moment. Perhaps having said something different, a different way you could have communicated what was going on for you. Perhaps there wasn't anything you could have done, but if there was there anything that you would do differently?
I'll step in here with a few thoughts as well. The core of all developmental and growth processes is a really considered practice of self-reflection and taking on constructive feedback from others, but also reflecting deeply with yourself and setting aside time. And I think that this embodied layer of self-reflection is really important. These extra dimensions you can bring into your own self-work, your own analysis of what worked well, what didn't work well, brings new lenses through which you can see the situation differently, and resource yourself better, prepare better, respond better. And I think that's kind of at the core of what SOMOS is about. We're not reinventing the wheel in leadership and personal development. We're just trying to bring these extra questions and extra lenses and more embodied processes into the mix. And at the heart of, I think, effective communication or empathic communication is a real desire to not react to a trigger, to a difficult, stressful situation, but instead to resource yourself and to respond and to move towards right action rather than instant action. Because often when we react, and we just make things worse. And at the core of that is this practice of pausing, of being mindful, of allowing our mind to catch up with our body, so that we can then step into an action that or a strategy to meet a need that is helpful and that serves our purpose and serves the relationship as well. So we kind of created this little slide, which is really just a bit of a toolkit uh, for how we deal with stressful situations, how we deal with triggers, how we deal with difficult conversations. And in NVC, there is the jackal that represents the kind of um, instantaneous reacting response. And then there is the giraffe that represents the kind of non-violent response. And what we're trying to do is kind of map out little things that we can start to form habits around that will help us to move from reaction to response. So I think at the core is to practice the pause, right? That's one of the most powerful things you can do is actually nothing. And to shift attention not to being defensive and to attacking or blaming, but instead to mindfulness, to compassion, to self-awareness. Much easier to say than to do, but this is a habit that can really help us in all of our interactions and collaborations because we can't really affect the fact that triggers will happen. You know, things, disagreements will happen. People will say things that dysregulate us. But what we can do is choose to be aware, but also choose to act differently to what maybe our default response could have been. And one of the things that really is a great way to kind of practice the pause and stall things is simply to acknowledge, clarify, and make observations. To start with what is objective, and also to clarify the experience, the perspective, and the understanding of the other person. To stay neutral, to be Switzerland, right? To not take any sides, but just to acknowledge the emotion, the content of what is being said or what is being done, and to clarify what are the steps that led to that situation, to observe what is happening in the room. And then when we speak, rather than blaming or getting defensive, just to speak from our own perspective. You know, when you said this, I noticed this in myself. Um, and while asking these questions, trying to kind of intuit what are my feelings and needs? What are we sensing in the other person? What's going on for them? What do I need right now to stay resourced, to come back to the regenerative zone, to regulate and co-regulate our nervous systems? And that can often be around taking a deep breath or even holding your breath. You know, actually, if and noticing also the speed of our speech. You know, when we speak really, really fast and we're in red zone and we're agitated, then actually we don't allow ourselves to breathe. And that only feeds our kind of anxiety and our intensity. But holding the breath can be a very powerful way to just bring our respiratory rate down, soothe our nervous system, and then be in a better place to move to response. And one of the things that also is really important is to consider what is important, right? In this interaction, is it to heal the relationship and to hold or nurture the relationship? Is it to get results? And I think what's really important is to also assess, do you have enough capacity within yourself, but also enough time in that meeting? And is it even the right space or environment to have this interaction properly? And so actually making the conscious choice to say, I hear you, I acknowledge everything that's been said and done. I don't think we have enough time. I don't think this is the right space. This isn't the right meeting to honor this interaction properly. Can we take a pause? Can we not ignore this? Can we acknowledge it, but then also create a time when we can really deal with it properly so that it doesn't completely overwhelm the meeting and so that also we don't disrespect other people's time. And so doing some visualization and some role play so that we can start to build these behaviors that are very easy to think about in hindsight, but very hard to do in the moment. It can help us become more effective in conflict situations, better moderators, but also more empathic in our communication. And as always, this is something that we'll never do perfectly. We're human, but what we can do is step back and practice and work on this and try and improve every time. And so the practice of, if we have had a stressful situation, rather than being in denial about it, forgetting it, pretending it didn't happen, actually doing the hard work of saying, you know what, I wasn't at my best. I made things worse. I was reactive. Let's really understand what happened. Let's give it time and attention. Let's be honest with ourselves, hold ourselves accountable so that we can be better next time. And if we can build this into the culture of our relationships, our families, our workplaces, then I think we'll all be much more effective.
In this second part of our session, we wanted to invite you to a brief taster of a social presencing theater embodied exercise, which is a methodology used within Theory U, a change management approach. You can, Anton, actually just maybe let go of slides for a moment. Great, thank you. Yes, a change management theory has been developed by Otto Schammer. And I will also give you a bit more of an idea of an experience of the embodied work we do, the embodied inquiry that we also do at SOMOS. And it may feel a bit different to our usual way of approaching problem solving, or just approaching, any situations. But in here, we're going to be allowing the wisdom to come through the body, which in turn can really open us up to new directions and fresh insights that often are not accessible just by thinking. So rather than trying to fix the situation, usually when we try to fix it with our mind, we use the same way of thinking that created that situation. But in here, we're going to be really paying attention to the body knowing, so we can discover the new directions and fresh insights. So we will be working with the body. We're going to start with meditation. And then I'll guide you through a bit of meditation and the embodied exercise. So make sure you're in a space where you will be able to make some movement, but it won't be very grand. It probably won't be a huge grand movement. But we'll see. Who knows what our bodies are holding and are trying to tell us. So yeah. So find a position that gives you ease and comfort. And just you're invited to just first really look in front of you at whatever that is, perhaps past your computer. But just noticing the colors and the textures, the shapes that are just in front of you. And it could be a quality of light or shadows in a space. It could be anything at all. We're just taking it in. And we're just awakening our senses. And that first sense that we're awakening is our visual sense. And then I'm going to invite you to take a moment to scan your space where you are right now. So you might want to do it by turning your head gently to one side and just allowing your eyes to roam. We can look down and up And just take in the qualities of what's inside of us, what's around us. We want to look the other way, just taking it all in. And we may notice certain things arise as we do that. Preferences like, I like this, I don't like that. But our intention here is really to notice the things that are around us and begin to focus gently on those things that are nourishing and supportive to us. You can turn your body if you'd like, if you haven't done already, and scan all the directions and sides around you. And after you've done the scanning, just take a moment to choose one thing in your space that is nourishing for you. And it can be an object, it can be a quality of light or color. And then bringing your attention towards that one thing that you've chosen. And just beginning to explore it a little bit more deeply, really allowing it to be received. And as you do that, you may notice the impact on you of this nourishing, supporting thing that you've chosen. Maybe you notice your breath settling, or something else that allows you to receive that support and nourishment. And then just gently bringing your attention away from that object, that thing that you've chosen. And if it feels comfortable for you, just closing your eyes and bringing your attention inside of your body. And as you close your eyes, you can also have an experience what it's like to have your eyelids support one another as you close them. And if you choose not to close your eyes, you can focus on a point in front of you, just to bring your attention inside a bit. But in a moment, we are going to turn our attention towards our sense of listening. And really allow our ears to receive whatever sounds are around us. And perhaps taking a moment to even notice any sounds that are coming from inside of you. You might want to notice the direction the sounds outside and inside of you are coming from, their volume, their pace, all the sounds that are near or far, up or down, in front of you, behind you. And in a moment, I'll invite you to draw attention towards your body and notice the contact of your body with any surface that you're sitting on. Feeling the support of that surface, a gentle pressure. allowing your shoulders to drop down and away from your ears. Maybe noticing your breath coming in and out through your nostrils. And just from that place of being in your body, just allowing yourself to bring to the mind a place in your life when you may feel stuck, where something that you're creating is not moving forward. Allow yourself to have a clear idea what this may be, what this stuckness may be. And perhaps just lean into that stuck situation. Let your body be the guide. Just allow yourself to feel into it. Trusting that the wisdom is there already. And noticing what's emerging. And just letting that feeling of being stuck in that particular situation come into your body as a shape or a gesture. Just allowing that feeling of stuck just come into as a shape, as a gesture, as a little sculpture, as you will, if you will. So really embody that feeling of stuck. Make it as concrete and visible. And it may not feel comfortable, but just try and stay with it for a moment. What it's like to lean into the stuckness. And just notice how your body naturally wants to move out of this shape. And just allow this movement. And allow the movement to continue until it comes to an end. Just notice where it ends. And allow it to continue until it does. And just notice a new shape, a new sculpture that your body is finding itself within. Really feel into this new shape of your body, new gesture. How does this feel? What do you notice in this second shape? And how is that different? Just taking a moment to notice yourself in the shape number 2. Notice your body. Notice the shape. And when you're ready, just release the shape. Come back to yourselves. Take a moment to perhaps open your eyes. Come back to here. And just take a moment to reflect on what you noticed. What was the difference between the stuck shape and the sculpture or gesture number 2? What was the movement from the stuck shape to sculpture number 2? And perhaps notice whether there are any insights or questions about your situation, your stuckness, that has arrived? Anything that may have surprised you in how your body moved in this very short and brief experience? Taking another minute or so just to take some notes for yourselves. Take a mental note, perhaps something that may have become clearer, perhaps new insights that came through your body. May feel different to what we are familiar with and used to. They may not, they may be quite subtle, and they may reveal their meaning over time, or they may be quite profound from get-go. But what's important is that we bring that curiosity and that openness to a different way of approaching a situation or making a decision. It's coming from a place of not knowing what will emerge, not knowing what will come through our bodies, and that really allows us to bring new possibilities rather than repeating the same sort of known ways of trying to fix our situation, trying to get unstuck, trying to find a solution, because we have only limited numbers of thoughts that or ways, habitual ways that we often just repeat and continue. So that's an invitation when we engage our body in this way, when we do more embodied inquiries, it can really gives us a different perspective, something different, something new can open up. And again, as I said, it may be quite subtle and we are not used to doing things in this way. So it may feel a bit weird, may feel a bit uncomfortable, may feel a bit like, what am I actually getting anything from it? And allowing ourselves to just keep an open mind and allowing the meaning to come to us rather than trying to push for a particular solution, particular outcome, can be very, very profound and quite countercultural, perhaps, within the culture we live in. And still really, really, just bringing a vast array of new possibilities. So, if Anton, you can bring up a slide, what we've just done in a very, very short exercise and a very, very brief taster was actually we went through the theory U process in an embodied way. So I'm not going to go into so much detail here, but this is something we also speak about in SOMOS. But it's a beautiful way of really looking at how we can suspend our past patterns, our habitual patterns, and really let go and surrender into the unknown and embrace the uncertainty. When we practice the and trust the presencing, the being present and sensing into what's emerging. So the bottom of the U, as you will see on this image. It really opens us up to emergence, to any emergent possibilities, to any ideas, any new ways of thinking to come to us. And in this exercise, we allowed this new movement to sort of emerge through us. And sort of crystallize into a shape, embodying the shape of a potential of potentiality. So again, that's something we do bring more and practice more in SOMOS. But I hope this gave you a new idea and a bit of a opening and curiosity about embodied inquiry. And I'll pass to Anton.
One of the things that often we do in our lives is we try and force a solution too quickly. We try and get to a place of certainty. a place of having the answer. But actually, what we need is more time for our unconscious mind um, to really sit with the complexity of the choice that we have or the problem that we face. And so, by doing a nature quest where we intentionally slow down, where we go through a journey of observation, of trying to feel into what spot do I want to be in, seeking new knowledge, noticing, being curious, and then integrating that in a group. What we do is allow for kind of a different type of insight, a different type of sensation and possibility to come through. And it might sound a little wishy-washy. That's why often you just need to experience it and actually just be in that sensory environment of a wonderful landscape of woodlands and fields and water streams and bird song and also community to actually start to see emotions and thoughts and perspectives bubble to the surface. And that's the magic of actually that kind of journey into nature with others and is at the heart of what SOMOS is about and the kind of the journey and through the portal and then back again. And this is something that can be a part of our lives, right? When we intentionally go for a walk in the park or when we kind of sit with a deeper embodied reflection of where we are in our lives. And at the heart of what I think works most effectively in any kind of experiential learning is this process of slowing down, going out into nature with a question, with a quest, and then coming back into group. And if it's not nature, then it's painting or dance or a different type of fun exercise. And I think that what we've enjoyed with Somos and also with Enchanted and other events we've done at Salgars is a playfulness with how we engage the body, how we also step into group processes and individual processes. And it's a lot of fun and lots of things come to the surface. And ultimately, as with any kind of personal development journey, you get what you put out, you get out what you put in. And you bring your own quest, your own context, your own challenges into what is quite an organic and open process. And so, what we want to do with the summer program is really create it so it's less like us teaching you about somatic intelligence, and it's more us experiencing it together on the land and being in this embodied inquiry together for 4 days. So hopefully you can make it. The dates are the 17th to the 20th of July. And it follows Enchanted, which is another kind of very creative, fun, regenerative event that we host at Salgas every year. So if you want 2 weeks of wonderful community time and nature time in the summer, then yeah, July is when we're hosting Enchanted and Summers.